Walking the path of understanding. That seemed to be the subject or the idea that came to me this week. I'm going to Sam inspired me last week talking about understanding, so I figure I'm going to take a go at it as well to build and expound upon some of the ideas that she conveyed with us last week. Understanding, as was mentioned in the beginning of the service, is one of these 12 powers that Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore identified that is a part of our inner nature. And we want to take this idea of understanding and talk about how we walk with it, how we live in it and from it. It's a very important quality. Jesus was one who advocated that people live in the world, but not of the world, meaning don't take your cues for how you see life and how you value life simply from the things that you see and experience around you. Take your cues in your understandings from the divine of you, the Christ of you, and see that into the world. And when you do that, that will tend to make you an iconoclast. It will tend to make you countercultural. It will tend to make you conduct yourself in a way that may not be understandable to the people who are outside of you, who are loving you and experiencing you, but it will be where you can you can be blessed and you can be a blessing to the world. So it's extremely important. One of the things that I feel is important is to distinguish between what I'll say is sensory understanding or intellectual understanding and that of spiritual understanding. Both types of understanding are important to live a successful, fulfilled, realized life, but they're not really the same thing. Intellectual understanding is that understanding that we take in from our five senses, what we see in the world, what we experience in the world. Spiritual understanding is that which comes directly from our oneness with God. The more that we set mortal mind to the side and embrace God mind, the more that we are able to align ourselves with the divine, and that allows a flowing forth of divine guidance, divine wisdom, divine blessings, as well as divine understanding. Intellectual understanding informs me. Spiritual understanding empowers me. Intellectual understanding I use. Spiritual understanding I trust. Intellectual understanding allows me to see all things in the world, while spiritual understanding allows me to see all things in God. So that spiritual understanding that we're going for, it doesn't just give us an understanding of what we see, it gives us an understanding of what's behind what we see. And moreover, where God is in what we see and in what we experience, and how God is wanting to outform and to outpicture in our lives, in our circumstances, in our affairs, in our finances, in our relationships. It gives us that extra dimension of reality that really, really empowers us. And I think this scripture really captures how we are to situate ourselves to be in line with divine understanding. It's from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, submit to Him or God or divine understanding, and that will direct your paths. So what we want to do here, as instructed by this scripture, is we want to take our heart, the very core of our consciousness, the very center seat of our being, as James Allen, the great writer, described the heart. We want to commit that part of our being that drives how we experience the world, drives what we see in the world, drives how we walk in the world. We want to commit that part of our being to God or to the Lord. And when we do that, we open ourselves up to spiritual understanding. So I would say that one component of spiritual understanding is recognizing where it comes from and opening ourselves up to it. And this scripture is a beautiful way of capturing that concept. The other thing about spiritual understanding is that it is not static. When I was a child, I played with childish things. But when I grew up, I put those childish things away. Why did I do that? One, because I matured. Well, hopefully. And two, because I understand greater than what I did. And because I understand life and myself and the world greater than what I did, childish things don't satisfy as they did. So you put those things away. But understanding often, or sometimes, it requires taking in new information, new awareness. Other times, understanding involves taking in a different awareness of something that we've already seen and experienced. And in the next slide here, it captures that idea. I see this a lot on Facebook, and it's always resonated with me, and I love this saying. The path isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. You continually come back to things you thought you understood, and you see deeper truths. Divine understanding works that way. I see people differently today than what I see people 20 years ago. And in a little while, I'm going to go into a life experience that I had that really, really captures this. So as we live and as we grow, because the divine is ever flowing forth with new ideas, new creativity, new and higher thoughts, hence the term new thought, understanding should be something that's fluid. Understanding should be something that we make ourselves available to. And when we go forward in life, we grow in intellectual understanding, and we also grow in spiritual understanding if we engage in the spiritual practices where we make ourselves available to it. And when that happens, we often see the things that we thought we understood in our lives, we see them a little bit differently. I was with one of my grandchildren yesterday, and I found myself just watching him. And in watching him, a new awareness about him came to mind. He's 8 years old. He's very calm, doesn't get riled up, very wise, smart as a whip. And I looked at him and I said, Kion, because that's his name, you are such an old soul. Because he comes across very wise. And I didn't really see that in him prior to yesterday. But in seeing that, it gave me a new understanding about my grandson, a new understanding of how to value him, to love him, and to appreciate him. I attribute that new understanding to spiritual understanding because I am always conscious of how to love people deeper, how to see people deeper, how to appreciate people greater than what is on the surface, and always try to stay in recognition of the fact that there's always more going on with each and every one of us than what we can see on the surface. I don't always get it right. I'm not trying to say that I'm some realized master here, but I try. And so new understandings, I'm coming up all the time. I have to believe that Charles Fillmore had this in mind when he thought about the idea of chemicalization. Now, when you hear the word chemicalization, I'm sure the first thing you think about are chemicals. You might think about your chemistry set, how you had that chemical in your chemistry set when you were young, or the periodic table of elements when you when you studied chemistry in school. The metaphysical understanding of chemicalization has nothing to do with this at all. Many of our New Thought pioneers embraced this idea of chemicalization. Charles Fillmore certainly did. Ernest Holmes certainly did. Mary Baker Eddy certainly taught chemicalization. What exactly is chemicalization? Charles Fillmore describes it beautifully. Whenever a new spiritual idea is introduced into the mind, some negative belief is disturbed. It resists. With the resistance comes more or less commotion of consciousness. This is called chemicalization. So chemicalization from a metaphysical, spiritual perspective is, as I engage in spiritual practice, and as new awarenesses and understandings arise in me, oftentimes those new awarenesses and understandings run into the cross currents of my current understanding, or it might run smack head on into my current understanding. When that occurs, an inner turmoil happens, an inner tension happens. We might consider this to be a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing. Because when this chemicalization happens, it is always the genesis of some sort of creative effort. Some creativity is emerging, something new is coming forth. And walking on the spiritual journey, chemicalization will come about. And sometimes the chemicalization can be so intense that it causes physical discomfort, physical sickness, physical commotion, physical depression. We might look at that as something wrong, but really what's happening is a new awareness is emerging. Something new is coming up. Something new that God is seeking to express in, through, and as you is running into something that has been there. And that negative belief can take many different forms. It can take the form of a belief that is just false. It's inconsistent with reality. It could take the form of a certain awareness that may have served you well when it took you from where you were to where you are right now. But it may not necessarily be healthy for where you are right now to where you are looking to go, or where you need to go, or where God would have you to go. So this chemicalization concept is an extremely important awareness in the life of the one who's on the spiritual journey, because as we grow spiritually, we'll run into this. Because human understanding is limited, divine understanding is infinite. The reality of those two things, there's going to be some chemicalization that is happening. Now, I want to illustrate this idea of spiritual awareness and heightened spiritual understanding over time. I want to illustrate this idea in an experience that I had some time ago while I was at work. I went to a certain section of my place of employment to carry out an aspect of my work that is kind of standard operating, and I encountered a coworker there that I'm very good friends with, even to this day. And something happened that day. I forget what it was. It was something on the news where it may have been some crime committed. I forget exactly what happened, but it was on every news channel, and myself and this co-worker got to talking about it, and then we got to talking about crime in general and how, some people seem to have a sense of not being considerate of others, and do things in a way that negatively affect others. So we were engaged in this conversation. And in the course of this conversation, this person said something to me that caught me off balance because it did not seem consistent with the conversation that we were having. This person said to me that I really don't understand why people would want to hurt others. I really don't understand. It really angers me when people steal from other people, when people commit crimes. And when I think of black people, I think some black people are law-abiding and okay, but most black people are criminals. This is what this person said. So, in me hearing that, I took a deep breath and I responded this way. You know, I don't think the majority of African American people are criminals. I think most African American people are law-abiding citizens, and then there's a smaller element that may be predisposed to committing crimes or doing things illegally. And in reality, I think that's true of just about any race or any group of people. I don't think it's exclusive to black people. And so this person said, you know, I think you're right. And so we continued to talk, and then I was done with my business, and I was on my merry way. The next day, coming back in the same place, doing the same business, this person came to me and said, you know, Art, I got to thinking about what you said last night, and I'm really, truly sorry. I don't want you to be upset at me. I think the world of you. Please forgive me. And I said, it's okay. It's fine. I'm glad you voiced that because in voicing it, we could actually have a conversation about it rather than me getting upset and walking off somewhere and we be at a stalemate. And so we began to talk about how this person grew up in a small town, and in growing up in a small town, didn't have many interactions with anyone who wasn't white or Caucasian, and did not really have interactions until they got several years into the working world. And this person explained to me that what they learned of black people was what they saw in TV and movies and what they heard at home. So we were continuing to talk, and this person made this following statement. Talk about going from the frying pan to the fire. But this is what this person said to me. You know, Art, you are very well spoken, and you are very articulate, and you are very intelligent. You must have some white in your family. This person was completely serious. It wasn't a joke. So again, another deep breath. So what did I do in response? Did I get offended and upset? Did I take this person's head off? I didn't pull back to retreat. I leaned in and engaged. It says, you know, I've never gone on Ancestry.com. I'm quite sure that somewhere in my family genealogy, there's some European there. But I don't think that for whatever ability that I have to articulate words and speak words, for whatever ability that I have, I don't think it has anything to do with my genealogy. I think it has more to do with having a mother that would not allow my brothers or I to get away with not correctly and fully enunciating words. So much so, where other people had written standards that they had to write, don't let me say a word incorrectly around my mother. What did you say? You didn't say that correctly. Spell that word. Now, does the way that word is spelled, does that match how you said it? No. Say that word again. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Now, you use that word in a sentence. Say that sentence again. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Now, don't let me catch you saying that word incorrectly again. For whatever ability that I have to communicate well, I think it has more to do with having a father that had the gift of gab. And a man that could go into any room and work that room verbally to the point of having everybody in that room listening to him communicate about life, communicate about whatever it was he was talking about. I remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. That was my dad. He was a great communicator, and he always communicated with all of us children, and he never let us get away without expressing our thoughts. I'm thinking that my ability to communicate has more with that than my whatever is in my genetics. And I don't know, maybe, just maybe, I'm willing to bet that anybody who grew up in a similar circumstance might also be well-spoken. All right, I just keep saying stupid things, don't I? I said, no, I said, I am not offended. I'm glad you're saying these things, and you're saying these things to me individually so that we can have a conversation about it, so that we can foster greater understanding. So we had this conversation, we parted, and when I left that area, I slipped into an empty conference room, and for 10 minutes, held this person in prayer, knowing their highest and best good and knowing understanding for them. Now, what was it that allowed me to be able to be in that moment and not be offended, not fly off the handle? It was the understanding that I carried into it. It was a time where I was playing with these new thought concepts and ideas, and one idea and concept is the most profound to me then as it is to me now, my oneness with God. So I am not whatever thoughts that this person grew up with around and about black people. I'm not that. I'm the presence of the divine in action. And you know what? So is this person. And there's an opportunity here for the divinity in me to touch and align with the divinity in her in a way that fosters greater understanding. I also know my purpose. My purpose, as I am experiencing it today, is to foster love, connection, and inspiration among all people in a way that creates a world that works for everyone. That is what resonates with me. So I had to engage based upon my understanding of who I am, based upon my understanding of who this person is, and there's an opportunity for greater understanding here. So I engaged in this conversation. It was a wonderful experience, and this person and I are still friends today. This person has since retired, and every now and then, they have to email me a picture of their feet on a recliner on a sandy beach, or a picture of themselves holding a cold beverage in their beautiful backyard to remind me of the fact that this person is retired, but I am not. I thought you were my friend. And this experience is what I think about when I see this often coming up quote from Charles Fillmore: when people understand each other, love increases. I would also say that that works in reverse. As people embody more love, it gives you more of an ability to understand people. I'm telling you, if that scenario would have happened 20 years ago, understanding is not what I would have been affirming. I would have affirmed something more nasty, more pointed, more directed. Because divine understanding allowed me to know that in spite of what I'm hearing, I get to choose how I respond. Now, I'm not saying that I'm some enlightened guru or master. I flub it up a lot. I stink it up a lot. But I'm grateful that in that moment and in that experience, I was able to walk the path of understanding in a way that promoted understanding and allowed not me to win, not this person to win, but the divine to win. And I'm grateful for that. It allowed for greater understanding, and this person didn't lose their dignity, and neither did I. If that's not God, I don't know what is. So I invite you to be open to divine understanding. Be open to allowing God to be God in you, and allow those divine ideas, that divine creativity, that divine wisdom, intelligence, and understanding to flow up and well up in you like a fountain coming out of the ground. And allow it to permeate your thoughts, to take your thoughts higher, to take your energy higher, and walk from that place. Because one thing I learned is that if you don't listen to divine guidance, it'll make you less sensitive to it when it comes up. So walk in the divine understanding that is your birthright. I hold you all in very sacred space. And into that sacred space, I speak a humble prayer. Light, life, and love to you all. God bless you.